that's true or not. So it is, alas, as Kathy said, in rhyming couplet, so bear with me. Come gather round people still new to the you, to hear of a fellow whom you thought you knew. The fellow named Barrett, or better yet, Jim, there are still a few things you could learn about him. I'll start with the things that you've already heard of, then move to the stuff that you've not heard a word of. Jim's kind and he's generous. He thinks first of others. If you had your choice, he'd be one of your brothers. The kind of a person that everyone praises. If he were still chair, I'm sure he'd give you raises. His impulse is noble, his choice of words deft, his politics proudly and properly left. His books are distinguished, his lectures refined. He can keep a whole bunch of things clear in his mind. So he gets to his point without any digression, and he stands at the top of the history profession. But since such things do soon get a bit tiring, let me tell you how hard my friend Jim was in hiring. And I don't want you thinking that I'm being sassy, because you really don't know what a pain in the ass it is. Our labor historian ranked Jim the first. You wouldn't have thought he'd come out the worst. And there in his dossier, one thing to thank was his very fine paper called Why Paddy Drank. It was a Harvard professor, if I must be truthful, said being uprooted produced Paddy's snootful. But Jim, at a stage that was still quite precocial, explained Paddy drank just because it was social. there are footnotes. By Jim and his work, we were all quite impressed, and you might think I'd say, well, you know the rest. How we went to the dean to open his coffers and offered Jim one of our very best offers, for we figured it might take more than a smidgen to attract such a plump and a promising pigeon. Yes, it was for the ex-com its most fervent wish to reel in for history this very fine fish, and we thought he'd come running here just like a lemming, but then came the hawing and also the hemming. Jim told us he thought that his life was just great in teaching his classes at old NC State. And I think he might also have said something silly of how he was fond of a place that was hilly. And I told him that this was no way to respond. He could be a fish in a much bigger pond, a pond that was growing, yes, minute by minute, because of the runoff from farms that was in it. And as for our flatness, that shouldn't much matter. Our flat was distinctive. No place could be flatter. A lad from Chicago should not hesitate. Champaign was close by, just 2 hours downstate. The process, I must say, it took a while. We gave Jim an inch, and then he took a mile. We reached the first deadline. He pled an extension. I gave him more line than I probably should mention. I feared that the worm on our job hook was withering. But Jim wasn't speedy, he just kept on dithering. Yet the story still ends with a positive spin. We waited him out, and at last reeled him in. And Jim brought with him Jenny, a babe on her shoulder, and Jenny, as usual, looked younger, not older. Jim settled in quickly, became a great neighbor, enlightening us all on the history of labor, and he's not been a pain in the neck ever since, not like some of the names former chairs could evince. You might check the footnote on this one. With Jim in our midst, the department improved, and it's wondrous to see the direction it's moved. The pluses are clearly right there to rehearse. It's brighter, it's younger, and much more diverse. Jim early deduced and correctly reflected how the place would be better by women directed. And now that that's happened, and yes, it's inspiring, Jim can be content and enjoy his retiring. So I'm happy to stand up and heartily cheer with you a friend very social who will share his beer with you.